Today we're going to be putting some Zenless agents into therapy. I feel like after a lot of the distressing stories that we've seen, I think it's about time to finally get some of them some help. Now, with the categories we have severe therapy, moderate therapy, and light therapy, being a scale of how badly do they need it based on their story. Then we have doesn't need therapy whatsoever, which I don't feel like a lot of characters are going to fall into this category. And then can't afford therapy. I wonder who may or may not fall into this. Crazy. As a warning, this will have spoilers right before chapter 3, so watch at your own discretion. Alright, let's get into this. Starting with Belle and Wise, I think they're going to go into the severe therapy category. Now, this is mainly because of everything that happened with the fall of New Eridu and, having to take on everybody else's problems. Like, they're already their own therapists in themselves. Like, I get it's the life of a proxy, but also, they've seen some messed up stuff, man. I mean, they literally watched Vivian die and then resurrect her. Like, yeah, I think they're going to need some heavy therapy. Moving on, we have Ambi, who I'm going to differ between Ambi and Soldier Zero Ambi, and I'm going to say she doesn't need therapy. Because Ambi just loves burgers. Ambi's just there to hang out the cunning hairs. After that, we have Billy, which, Billy might have a hyper obsession with Starlight Nights, but I don't think that's, anything therapy-wise. Nicole, she can't afford therapy. She can't afford therapy. There's no way. I feel like if she could afford it, she would be up there. But there's no way in hell that she could afford it. Then we have Corin, who I believe should be in moderate therapy. I don't think she has any trauma, like major trauma, but I do believe her anxiety does get the best of her, and I feel like she can work out some of her problems and, learn to not apologize as much. Anton should go into moderate therapy, just because he talks to his bro so much. I think maybe him and his bro might have some things to talk about between them and the therapist. Ben, I don't feel like he needs therapy. I think he's pretty chill. Sakaku, honestly, I feel like goes into two different categories. I feel like she would be in severe category due to, most of the Onis being gone to the Oni War. But also, I feel like she would cause therapy. You don't feed this girl and she would cause an absolute ruckus. And when she absolutely locks in, I feel like she's absolutely freaking terrifying. I would not want to cross paths with Sakaku when she's not in a good mood. Then we have Piper. And I don't feel like she needs therapy. I think she just sleeps a lot. She's a chill granny. Then we have Lucy, who I feel like needs some light therapy. I feel like she needs to work through some of the stuff with her daddy and mommy issues, it seems like. I think she's just mainly a tsundere, and I don't think you can really fix a tsundere personality. Not coming from any experience at all. Moving on, we have Lycon, who I think needs severe therapy after going through Lycon and Hugo's story within the main story quest. Yeah, I think Lycon might need some help figuring out some stuff, especially because of, losing many of his limbs and being abandoned as a child. Yeah, I think that calls for severe therapy to work through things. Rena, I feel like she would go into severe or moderate therapy just because of her backstory, but in this sense, I feel like she causes therapy just due to the food that she cooks and trying to get people to eat it. Maybe that's not therapy and maybe that's a hospital, but I feel like there would be a lot of mental trauma with, trying to eat her food in general. I feel like Grace would cause a good amount of trauma to people. Specifically to the artificial intelligence, just seeing how she treats Arya and Billy and her major infatuation with Eos. I feel like she kind of goes on par with Rena with her actions causing a lot of people trauma. Lyda, I think she'd be in moderate therapy just because of her anger issues. I feel like she's a very angry little girl, but maybe that's also just her personality. We would have to see when we throw her into the ring. I don't feel like she'd go to therapy willingly. I feel like she'd be clawing hand and foot, trying to drag herself out of the therapist's office, or possibly, trying to rip off the therapist's face. I don't know, I kind of just imagine her pretty feral. Nekomata, I feel like would not be able to afford therapy along with Nicole, Ambi, and Billy. But I feel like she doesn't really need therapy. I think she's just chilling. I think she's happy with the cunning hairs. Soldier 11, feel like she needs severe therapy. Knowing that of her backstory between her and Soldier Zero Ambi, and all the wars that they've been in and being sent out, I think a lot of that would cause some trauma, especially because she's still in Opal Squad. I think that would cause a lot of trauma along the line. Ellen, I don't think she needs therapy. Besides working for Victoria Housekeeping, I feel like she's just a very average high school student, just very sleepy, very edgy, you know, the usual. Nothing that therapy can actually fix. Julian, I feel like she's pretty average. She's just a normal cop lady. I feel like maybe she wouldn't see that much traumatizing stuff. Chingy absolutely would cause therapy to people, on the other hand. I feel like she's more scary and intimidating compared to Julian. She definitely takes a more brutal route when it comes to stuff, and I feel like that would traumatize bad guys and maybe passing civilians, depending on what's going on. Jane Doe obviously causes therapy. Jane Doe is one of those characters who does not care and will just do her job in any way that she sees fit. In that sense, that is absolutely terrifying and also very attractive. Moving on. Seth. I feel like he would probably have some light therapy just due to his parental and brotherly issues, maybe gaining a little bit more confidence, seeming that, you know, Jane Doe can use him as a doormat. Caesar, I feel like, would lose some light therapy just because, you know, she needs to be more assertive in herself and being okay with what she loves and not having to hide that within herself. I think it's very adorable that she does love a bunch of romance stuff, and I don't feel like she has to hide behind a tough exterior just to, you know, hide that. Bernice would absolutely cause trauma to people. She's crazy. She's just crazy. That's all. I love Bernice. Yanagi would either be the therapist because she's kind of like the mom friend, but also I feel like she lands in the severe therapy category just because of her job and the whole Oni-war thing, saving Sukaku and stuff like that. I feel like that's a little traumatizing and that she holds a lot of guilt because of that. Lighter would be more in the severe therapy category just because of how he's talked a little bit about wanting to not be around anymore, if you get what I mean. I feel like that's kind of a red flag. So Yabi definitely needs severe therapy because what the fuck? No, it's not the autism that she brings to the function. It's because of the curse of Tierlist. I feel like would be a lot on her. She has a lot of family stuff to work through and the curse that she is blessed with. Or, I guess you could say cursed with. I don't know. It makes her a cool void hunter, though. That's all I have to say. Harumasa. Oh my god. Severe therapy. No doubt. No doubt. He's one of my favorite characters, and I could go on for ages about him and his story and his character. And as much as he's a lazy bum, dear god, his story is really upsetting. He is definitely a character who needs some help. Even though he probably wouldn't show up in the first place. He would call and make some sort of excuse of why he couldn't show up. Astra, I don't feel like she needs therapy. She has money. She's fine. No, kidding. But besides that, I feel like she doesn't really have much to worry about. She is a pop idol after all. Evelyn would go into the severe therapy category just for being an assassin. But for the most part, I feel like she kind of goes along with Jane Doe, where she kind of more so causes therapy upon her enemies and stuff like that to protect the people that she loves. Even just threatening Belle, if it's in a more lighthearted way, I don't know. I wouldn't find somebody, like, joking to be assassinated as a joke. Like, she's kind of scary, but, like, girl boss it. Soldier Zero Ambi, definitely severe therapy. Having multiple clones of yourself and seeing them die, being one of the last few who survive, and having to end one of your clones and stuff like that, yeah, I think that's pretty traumatizing. Soldier Zero Ambi's story is really cool, but holy crap is it depressing. Trigger, severe therapy. Oh my god, her story as well was really sad, and her wanting to protect the people that she loves, and also being an assassin, I feel like plays into the part of, you know, needing to talk about some of those traumas that go on. Pulchera, I feel like she would cause therapy just because of her past and a lot of her anger issues, especially if she's working with Bernice. I feel like that's a double whammy of, oh god, I'm totally cooked, aren't I? Vivian needs severe therapy, and no, not because of her obsession with Lord Pathan. I also love Vivian, but holy crap, she died. That's traumatizing and was, you know, harassed her entire life for her abilities. That is absolutely depressing. I love Vivian, I need her protected, but dear god, does that girl need help? You know, obsessing over Lord Pathan isn't going to fix your problems, girlfriend. Hugo, oh my god, severe therapy. God, both of Mockingbird being in therapy. Shocker. Fork found in kitchen, guys! His backstory and what he went through in his mind was crazy. absolutely has a lot of issues going on in his life between the abandonment, between his family. It has so much to unpack. He is such a beautifully written character. But man, does this theater kid have some issues that he needs to work through. That would be like the craziest therapy session, is having Hugo and Lycon right next to each other, trying to figure out their issues from the past. They could go to couples therapy together and work out their issues, you know. It would be fine. Alright. Shifu. She would need some severe therapy just because of her sister and taking on the role in Yunquei Summit. Watching your sister die to something that you are trying to protect other people from, especially Xiaoguang. That's real upsetting, especially because it was not her time to go. Xiaoguang would be in severe therapy just due to how much she uses the fucking Qingbing sword. How many memory issues she has due to it. Because, like, let's be real. Using that sword and losing out on memories and forgetting things and forgetting people, that's not even, like, therapy level stuff. She would have her own tier of having to be like, a special case where they had to watch over her and see what goes on while they try medications and different therapy sessions on her and see how to get her stuff back. I feel like Fufu would probably fall more under severe just because she is the last one of her species, and that is pretty isolating. Senior Yunhu, I feel like he doesn't have much going on, and I feel like he's just like one of the chillest dudes ever, so I feel like he would be a therapist. I feel like he's one of those guiding lights who would guide everybody in Yunquei Summit and anybody who asks of him. Like, kind of like Nagi, who kind of has like a parent sort of demeanor. Yuzaha! Absolutely severe therapy. Going through her story made me really sad, and which leads me as well to Alice, who would also go under severe therapy just because their traumas add up into each other's stories, and that they both really deserve better. Being experiments and, you know, losing a parent, that's all really traumatizing and really terrible, and as much as I love them together, I really hope what they have isn't considered a trauma bond. Lucia would go into severe therapy just because of the trauma that she has gone through with her tribe. Being the night emissary and staying up and being so infatuated with ethereals does come with its costs, and seeing the night horror and hearing so many stories about it and having to go through all that and just going through her story, oh dear god, like, a lot of Spook Shack stories were really upsetting. Which also brings me to Monato. Absolutely severe therapy as well, usually because of his story as well, and having to work through not really belonging within a group and all the past stuff of who he wanted to be and who he is now. Throughout his story, he slowly worked through it, but still something to talk about and to work through. And then we have Yahardi. I feel like Hari also goes under severe therapy, even though we had a whole mission where she kind of did go to therapy. And that really didn't work out for her, seeming that she basically went into a coma, and we had to fish her out of there. Being stuck in a hollow and basically going through Groundhog's Day over and over and over again sounds like a nightmare. I don't know how she went out with that and went, yeah, actually this would be like a really good story idea. Like, that's one way to cope with it, but girlfriend, I think she needs a better source of therapy, away from the one that she did go through. Less comas. Seed. Absolute severe therapy. I cried. I really thought Seed Senior was going to come back. I hoped out for the best. And ouch, I was hurt in the end. She tried holding on and she tried believing. She absolutely just needs some more support than she is already getting. With her childhood and Seed Senior being gone, that leaves a major impression on you. Orphe. Severe therapy. Seeming that she's not really her own person. Magus is kind of controlling her in an aspect where they're kind of like one and the same person, that she can never truly be her own person. That's a lot to work through, even though she acts like it's okay. I get Magus, like, wants her to live her life, but it doesn't feel like she'll fully ever be able to live her own life. And then we have Dylan. I feel like she also goes under severe therapy just because she can hear the voices of the dead, and that's terrifying in itself. That's gotta get to you after a while. And also being sacrificed into a hollow? That's cult behavior! And then that also gives you trust issues. Banyue, he would be a therapist. I know he's an artificial construct and didn't really have like the happiest of times, but I feel like he worked through a lot of it to get to where he is, and that he would also be a guiding light. He helped guide Xiaoguang and her brother. He literally went from being an artificial construct that doesn't really feel or do much to feeling empathy for human beings, and I think that's enough to deem worthy of a therapist. Zhao needs some severe therapy, seeming that her demeanor kind of makes her off-putting in a way. Like, as much as she's a little labubu, like, her story made me really sad. I didn't like Zhao for the longest time until I played her story, and I was Really sad to see that her mentality was due to how she grew up and how everything is equal exchange. I'm so happy she had growth and that she was able to learn past that, but I feel like that is something to talk about, past family trauma. We have Nangang, which I don't feel like she needs therapy whatsoever. I think she's just a little nepo baby. Like, she kind of already has her life in order. She has money. She just wants the Angels of Delusion to thrive. That's basically about it. She's like the low cortisol of everybody. We have Arya, who I believe needs severe therapy due to, you know, the trauma of being a fighter robot and then having to climb her way up to success and still being afraid to be her true self. She wants to be something she's not because she's afraid of other people judging her, and I totally feel that. But I feel like she should be loved whether she's an artificial construct or she's in her projection form. I feel like she has a lot of layers of things to work through. And then we have Suna, who I feel like she would need moderate therapy. Nothing too bad. I think it's like along the lines of Korn that she has a lot of self-doubt, and you know, this random kid that Nangang pulled off the street, she just has like crippling anxiety, and I can't blame her. She's a little crybaby. She doubts herself. So I don't feel like she's traumatized levels, but I feel like she does actually need to gain some confidence in herself. Then we have Cecilia, who also can't afford therapy. I'm so sorry. Like, she's basically owned by NEPs. She's under their thumb. I feel like maybe that would be covered under their insurance, I guess, but definitely do believe she would have to be in like severe therapy after seeing how traumatized she was, seeing Promia and being homeless and kind of being on the run and always constantly having to scrounge for food. That's really traumatic to have to live through. So I feel like she'd be in the severe to moderate category, but I don't feel like she'd be able to afford it just because she would always be trying to pay for snacks. She believes that, hey, as long as my belly's full, you know, I'm happy. And you know what? Slay. Slay Cecilia. We love her. So this is the end result of our tier list. Wow. Wow, a lot of characters need a lot of severe therapy. This is going to be a large bill to rack up. That's all I gotta say. Please like and subscribe for more. We'll be doing more gacha content in the future, seeing that gacha is my ball and chain. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!